You know what's wild? The average American has $8,000 in their savings account. $8,000. That's it. And honestly, that number is way more generous than reality because half of Americans have less than $500 saved. $500? That's like, what, 2 months of DoorDash orders? Maybe 3 if you're being disciplined and only ordering twice a week instead of pretending that $15 pad thai counts as treating yourself? But here's where it gets really unexpected. When you break down the average savings by age, the numbers don't just look bad, they look absolutely insane. And I'm not talking about the, oh, people aren't saving enough kind of insane. I'm talking about the, wait, this can't be right kind of numbers that'll make you either feel really good about yourself or have a full-blown existential crisis in the next 20 minutes. Hi, I'm Matt, and on this channel I break down personal finance, investing strategies, and how to actually build wealth without the BS. If you're tired of generic financial advice that sounds like it came from your uncle who still thinks a pension is coming back, hit that subscribe button. We're diving into the real numbers, the uncomfortable truths, and the sarcastic commentary about why we're all financially struggling. So let's talk about what people are actually saving at every age, why these numbers are absolutely bonkers, and what you can do about it before you're 70 years old still working because your retirement plan is maybe I'll win the lottery. The average 25-year-old in America has negative $23,074 in net worth. Negative $23,000. You're not at zero, you're $23,000 in the hole before you even started. And look, I get it. Student loans are basically a mandatory subscription service now, except unlike Spotify, you can't just share your friend's account. You're stuck with this bill that makes your monthly budget look like a hostage situation. But here's where nobody talks about. Even the people who don't have student loans, the ones who worked through college or got scholarships or had parents who actually planned ahead, even they are broke. The median savings for someone in their 20s is $7,638. Not net worth, savings. Actual money sitting in an account earning 0.01% interest while inflation is out here acting like it's training for a marathon. And before you think, well, that's just because they're young, let me tell you, it gets worse, or better, depending on how much you enjoy being disappointed by humanity. The average savings in your 20s is $113,000. Wait, what? How did we jump from $7,600 to $113,000? Here's the unexpected part. That number is being dragged up by the people who are 28, 29 years old, maybe got a tech job before the 2023 layoffs, or had family money, or sold their soul to investment banking for 3 years and actually saved instead of immediately upgrading their lifestyle. This is the pattern you're going to see throughout this entire video. The median, the actual middle person, is broke. The average is getting pulled up by a small percentage of people who either got lucky, made smart choices early, or both. And that gap between those two numbers just keeps getting wider. Now pause for a second. I want you to think about your own savings right now. Not your net worth, not your retirement accounts, just your actual emergency fund sitting in a high-yield savings account. Got that number in your head? Because in about 3 minutes, I'm going to show you where you actually rank. And spoiler alert, you're probably either way ahead or way behind. There's almost no middle ground anymore. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your 20s financially and why the numbers look like a crime scene. When you're 25, you're supposed to be figuring things out, right? You're building your career, maybe changing jobs every 18 months because that's the only way to get a raise anymore. And you're dealing with the fact that entry-level jobs now require 5 years of experience and a master's degree to answer emails for $45,000 a year. So yeah, having $7,600 saved seems almost impressive until you realize that's not even 3 months of expenses in most cities. You get laid off, your car dies, you need emergency dental work because apparently grinding your teeth at night from financial anxiety counts as a pre-existing condition, and boom, you're broke. Not, I need to skip Starbucks for a week broke, actually broke. But here's what really gets me. The advice you get in your 20s is absolutely delusional. Everyone's telling you to max out your Roth IRA. Great, that's $7,000 a year. Cool. Except after taxes, rent, student loans, car payments, and the mandatory subscription services we've all convinced ourselves are essential, like 3 different streaming platforms because each one has that one show you need to watch, you're not exactly swimming in extra cash. And then some financial guru on TikTok is telling you to invest in index funds, start a side hustle, learn to code, wake up at 5 a.m. and practice loud budgeting like it's some revolutionary concept to not spend money you don't have. Meanwhile, you're just trying to figure out how people are affording $2,000 rent and still going on vacation twice a year. Spoiler alert, they're not saving anything, they're just really good at looking like they have their life together on social media. The unexpected truth about savings in your 20s? Most people aren't saving at all. They're surviving. The ones who are saving, the ones pulling that average up to $113,000, they're either living with their parents rent-free, working in tech before the AI panic hit, or they're that person who bought Bitcoin in 2020 and actually sold at the top instead of holding it all the way back down like a financial martyr. Here's a real-world example. In 2024, the average starting salary for a college graduate was around $58,000. Sounds decent, right? Except after taxes, that's maybe $42,000 take home. Rent in a mid-sized city? $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year gone. Student loans? $300 a month. Another $3,600. Car payment and insurance? $400 a month. $4,800. Now you're down to $15,600 for food, utilities, healthcare, gas, phone bill, and trying to save for emergencies and retirement simultaneously. You see the problem? The math doesn't math. And that's before we even talk about Temu addiction, impulse ordering on Amazon at 2 a.m. because the algorithm knows you're stressed, or the fact that going out with friends once a week somehow costs $80 now because everything is expensive and also you deserve to have a life, right? Wait, let me ask you directly. Are you in your 20s right now watching this? What's your actual savings number? Because the data says $7,600 median, but I bet half of you are sitting there thinking, I wish I had $7,600 saved. And the other half are thinking, I have way more than that. Am I doing okay? The answer is probably yes, you're ahead. But keep watching because the gap is about to get really ugly. The reality is that your 20s are less about hitting some magical savings number and more about not completely screwing yourself over. Don't take on bad debt. Don't finance a car you can't afford. Don't rack up credit card debt because you wanted to go to Coachella. Start putting money into a Roth IRA, even if it's just $100 a month. Build your credit score by opening a no-fee credit card and paying it off every month. These sound boring, but boring works. So, you made it to your 30s. Congratulations! You're officially an adult, which means you're old enough to understand that adulting is a scam, but too young to give up and move to a cabin in the woods. The median savings for someone in their 30s is $35,649. The average is $317,000. And once again, we're seeing this absolutely bonkers gap that just screams wealth inequality is having a moment. Let me translate those numbers for you. The median person in their 30s has saved about $35,000. That's almost 5 times what they had in their 20s, which sounds great until you realize that's still barely enough to cover 6 months of expenses if you lose your job. And in an economy where companies are laying people off via Zoom call with 2-week severance and a thanks for your service email, 6 months is not exactly a safety net. It's more like a safety suggestion. But the average? $317,000? How? Who are these people? Well, here's where it gets uncomfortable. A huge chunk of that average is being driven by homeowners. In 2024, roughly 47% of people in their 30s own a home, and their net worth is significantly higher because, shockingly, owning an appreciating asset instead of paying rent to someone else's mortgage tends to build wealth. Wild concept. Let me give you a real-world breakdown. Take 2 people, both 35 years old, both making $70,000 a year. Person A bought a house in 2019 for $250,000. By 2024, that house is worth $380,000. They've paid down maybe $40,000 of the mortgage, so their equity is roughly $170,000. Add in some retirement savings, an emergency fund, and they're sitting at a net worth around $250,000. Person B rented the whole time. They paid $1,800 a month in rent for 5 years. That's $108,000 gone forever. Sure, they didn't have to deal with property taxes, maintenance, or that one weekend where the water heater explodes, but they also don't have any equity. 0. Their net worth is whatever they managed to save, which, if their average, is maybe $40,000 to $50,000. That's a $200,000 wealth gap created by one decision. And before you start with the "but renting is cheaper" argument, yeah, it can be, especially right now in 2025 when mortgage rates are still hovering around 6.5 to 7% and home prices are absolutely unhinged. But long-term, the data's pretty clear. Homeowners end up wealthier. And here's the really unexpected part. Your 30s are when the gap between the people who are going to be financially free and the people who are going to work until they're 75 starts to solidify. If you're in your 30s right now and you don't have at least $50,000 saved, you're behind. Not to, oh, you messed up a little behind. You're a, you need to make some serious changes right now behind. Because here's what happens. Compound interest is supposed to be your best friend, but it only works if you actually have money to compound.
If you're 35 and you have $10,000 saved and you put away $500 a month for the next 30 years at a 7% return, you'll have around $630,000 by 65. Not bad. But if you're 35 and you have $100,000 saved and you do the same thing, you'll have $1.8 million. That's a $1.2 million difference created by what you did in your 20s and early 30s. If you're still watching this and you're in your 30s or approaching your 30s, here's what matters. Do you own a home? Are you planning to buy one? Are you in the I'll never afford a house, so why even try camp? Because this is the decade where that decision matters most, and the math is getting worse every year. The median home price in the US in 2025 is around $420,000. To afford that comfortably, you need to be making roughly $110,000 a year. The median household income is $75,000. You see the problem. The math doesn't work. So people are either stretching themselves financially to buy a house they can barely afford, or they're renting forever and hoping that maybe the market crashes. Here's another real-world example. In 2022 and 2023, we had massive tech layoffs. Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft all cutting tens of thousands of jobs. A lot of those were in their 30s, making $150,000 to $200,000 a year, and they thought they were set. Then boom, laid off. And you know what separated the people who panicked from the people who were fine? Savings. The ones who had been living below their means and building an emergency fund, they took a few months off and found another job. The ones spending every dollar, they were scrambling. This is the decade where you either lock in good habits or you don't. You need to get serious about saving. Not to, I'll save whatever's left over saving, actual intentional, I'm paying myself first saving. Aim for 20% of your income if you can. Automate it. Set up transfers the day after you get paid. Max out your retirement accounts, Roth IRA, 401k, HSA. If your employer matches 401k contributions, you better be contributing enough to get the full match. That's free money.
Welcome to your peak earning years. This is supposed to be when everything comes together financially. You're making more money than you ever have. Your career is established. You've figured out what you're doing with your life. Except, plot twist, a lot of people in their 40s and 50s are more stressed about money than they've ever been. Why? Because they're finally doing the retirement math, and it's not looking good. The median savings for someone in their 40s is $125,000. The average is $791,000. Once again, massive gap. And for people in their 50s, the median is $288,000, while the average is $1.4 million. These numbers sound big until you realize what you actually need to retire comfortably, and then suddenly they look adorable. Let's do some quick math. The average American spends about $60,000 a year in retirement. Social Security will cover maybe $24,000 of that if you're lucky. So you need to generate $36,000 a year from your savings. Using the 4% rule, which says you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio each year without running out of money, you would need $900,000 invested just to cover that gap. $900,000. The median person in their 50s has $288,000. They're $612,000 short. That's not a rounding error, that's a retirement crisis. And here's the unexpected part. Even people who are making really good money in their 40s and 50s are struggling to save. Why? Because lifestyle inflation is real, and it's ruthless. You start making $150,000 a year instead of $75,000, and suddenly you're living in a nicer house, driving a nicer car, taking nicer vacations, and somehow you're still living paycheck to paycheck. Real-world example. In 2024, the median household income for someone in their late 40s was around $85,000. Sounds solid. But if you're in a high cost of living area, you're probably spending $40,000 to $50,000 just on housing, taxes, and insurance. Add in kids, because apparently raising a child to 18 now costs around $310,000 according to recent data, and you're not exactly rolling in extra cash. And then there's healthcare. If you're in your 50s, you're starting to actually use your health insurance instead of just paying for it. Prescriptions, specialists, that random pain that won't go away and requires an MRI that costs $3,000 even with insurance, it adds up fast. Your 50s are also when you're supposed to be helping your kids with college, maybe supporting aging parents, and still trying to save for your own retirement. It's like you're financially squeezed from both ends, and the only way out is to make more money or spend way less. And most people aren't doing either. How much do you actually have saved for retirement right now? Not your net worth, including your house. Liquid, investable assets. Because if it's less than $500,000, you're probably going to be working longer than you planned. And if it's less than $250,000, you might want to start thinking about what retirement even means to you, because the traditional stop working at 65 and travel the world thing, that's not happening. Here's another 2024-2025 reality check. A lot of people in their 40s and 50s right now are dealing with the aftermath of the 2022 market crash. If you had $500,000 invested in early 2022, it dropped to maybe $350,000 by October. Yeah, it recovered, but if you panicked and sold, or if you had to pull money out for emergencies, you locked in those losses. Or let's talk about the AI job anxiety that's hitting people in their 40s and 50s harder than anyone else. You've been doing the same job for 20 years, you're good at it, you're well paid, and now there's a legitimate fear that ChatGPT or some other AI tool is going to make your job obsolete in the next 5 years. So do you retrain? Do you pivot? Do you just hope for the best? The uncertainty is real. The unexpected truth about your 40s and 50s, this is when the decisions you made in your 20s and 30s come back to haunt you. If you bought a house, started saving early, kept your lifestyle in check, you're probably doing okay. If you didn't, you're stressed, you're behind, and catching up requires serious sacrifices. If you're in this age range and behind, you need to catch up fast. This might mean uncomfortable changes. Downsize your house, get rid of the car payment, cut back on vacations, focus on your savings rate above everything else. If you're only saving 5% of your income, that's not going to cut it. You need 25 to 30% if you want any chance of retiring at a reasonable age. And pay off your debt, all of it. Every dollar you're paying in interest is a dollar that's not growing for your retirement. Here's the unsexy truth about building wealth. It's boring. There's no shortcut, there's no secret strategy. It's literally just save more, spend less, invest consistently, and wait. That's it. I know you were hoping for something more exciting, like invest in this one stock or use this weird trick hedge funds don't want you to know. But no, it's just math and discipline over a long period of time. The less you need, the easier financial freedom becomes. You don't need $2 million to retire. You need enough to cover your expenses. If you can live on $40,000 a year, you need $1 million invested. If you can live on $30,000, you need $750,000. So maybe the answer isn't just make more money and save more money. Maybe it's also figure out how to need less money. Move to a cheaper area. Pay off your house so you don't have a mortgage. Learn to cook instead of DoorDashing every meal. Find hobbies that don't cost money. I know this sounds like old person advice, but old people figured out how to retire. Most of us aren't on track to do that, so maybe they know something we don't. The average savings by age in America is depressing. The numbers are bad. The wealth gap is widening. Most people are way behind where they need to be. But here's the unexpected part. You're not most people. You're watching a 20-minute video about personal finance. You care enough to learn. That automatically puts you ahead of like 80% of the population who's just winging it. The numbers are ugly, but they don't have to be your numbers. You can be the outlier. You can be the person who actually builds wealth, retires comfortably, and doesn't have to stress about money in your 60s and 70s. It just requires making different choices than most people are making. Boring choices, disciplined choices, choices that actually work over decades, not days. Because at the end of the day, wealth isn't about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. It's about spending less than you earn, investing the difference, and letting compound interest do the heavy lifting. The people with $300,000 saved in their 30s didn't get there by accident. They got there by making intentional decisions every single day for 10 years straight. Small decisions that added up to massive results. And if you're sitting there thinking, I'm too far behind, it's too late for me, you're wrong. It's never too late to start. Yeah, starting at 45 is harder than starting at 25, but starting at 45 is a hell of a lot easier than starting at 55. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't going to close itself. Nobody's coming to save you. There's no inheritance coming. There's no lottery win. There's no crypto moonshot that's going to solve all your problems. It's just you,
your income, your expenses, and the choices you make every single day. That's it. That's the whole game. The data doesn't lie. The average person is broke, but average is a choice. And if you're still here after 20 minutes, you've already proven you're not average.